Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring the life of a really fascinating figure from early Islam, Jafar ibn Abi Talib.
Oh, this is gonna be good. I love this guy,
Right. Now, most people have probably heard of his brother Ali,
for sure. Much more famous.
but Jafar's story, oh man, it's full of these incredible moments, courage, compassion, really stuff that, well, it just deserves way more attention, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many other, well, kind of unsung heroes there were back then.
Totally. Shaping history, but not getting, like, the credit they deserve.
Right. It's a good question to think about. History often focuses on the big names, but those working, behind the scenes, they're just as important, right?
Exactly. And that's actually what got me so interested in Jafar in the first place. The sources we have, they paint this incredible picture of his life, his conversion, that early migration, even like his bravery on the battlefield.
Yeah, and we can't forget about his wife, Asma bint Umayz, either.
Oh, for sure.
A strong woman, super resilient. Her life, it's intertwined with some of the most important figures in early Islam.
Okay, so let's start, I guess, at the beginning. I read that both Jafar and Ali, they were actually raised by relatives because their father had some financial issues, right?
That's right.
And Ali was raised by, no way, the Prophet Muhammad himself.
Yep.
And Jafar by their uncle, Al-Abbas. I mean, can you imagine the impact that must have had? Growing up so close to, well, the beginnings of the Muslim community.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's key to remember that Jafar was one of the very first people to accept Islam, like right at the very beginning. Him and his wife, Asma, they were both there.
Wow. So this was back in Mecca when being Muslim was, well, pretty
A
dangerous.
little persecution.
It must have taken such courage to do that, knowing the risks.
It did.
And then things got even worse, right? And the Prophet advised a group of Muslims, Jafar and Asma included, to seek refuge in Abyssinia.
Modern-day Ethiopia.
Okay, and this is where things start to get really interesting.
This is where you see Jafar's leadership abilities. The Prophet chose him to lead this whole journey, entrusting the safety of all these early Muslims to a Christian king, al-Najashi. Imagine that responsibility in a foreign land.
Wow. That's a huge leap of faith. And wait, I remember reading that the Quraysh, they weren't just going to let them go, right?
Nope. They sent people to try to get them back.
Sent emissaries to the king.
Tried to bribe him.
Yeah.
Played on religious differences. The pressure must have been immense.
Oh, man, yeah. So what happened?
Well, Jafar, he stepped up, stood before the king and his whole court, and gave this incredible speech
Really? Defending Islam.
defending Islam, talking about justice, kindness, monotheism, all those core values. And he framed it in a way that really resonated with them.
So it was more than just like reciting doctrines, right? He was building bridges.
Exactly.
I'm curious, did he actually quote from the Quran?
He did. Verses from Surah Maryam, the story of Jesus' birth.
Oh, wow.
And, some accounts say that people were moved to tears, like the king and his court.
That's powerful. It shows how his words, how his message really, really had an impact.
Yeah, it was a turning point.
So the king, what? He didn't expel them.
He not only refused, but he actually converted. He offered them protection. Huge moment for that early community.
Wow. I can only imagine what that must have meant for them.
Yeah. Sanctuary in this completely different land.
So they stayed there in Abyssinia for like 10 years.
About a decade.
Meaning they missed some big stuff. The Hijra.
Right.
Can you quickly, like for people who might not know, what was the Hijra?
Oh, sure. So that was the Prophet Muhammad's migration from Mecca to Medina in 622 CE. Really the start of the Muslim community. Even the Islamic calendar begins there.
So all that's happening, and meanwhile, Jafar and Ozma, they're raising a family in Abyssinia. Must have been tough being so far away.
It shows their commitment and their resilience. But they did eventually return to Medina, and their arrival, it coincided with the Prophet's victory at Khaybar.
Oh, wow. Talk about a homecoming. I read that the Prophet was so happy to see Jafar. He said he didn't know what made him happier, the victory or Jafar's return.
It's a beautiful story. They were very close.
And then shortly after that, this tragedy happens, right? The Prophet's uncle, Hamza, he's killed in battle.
Right. Leaves behind a young daughter.
And this is where we see Jafar's compassion.
Right.
He, along with Ali and Zayd, they all wanted to raise her, right?
Yep.
And the Prophet gave her to Jafar. He even said that Jafar was the most like him, both in appearance and character.
Really powerful statement.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Jafar's nickname, Abu al-Masakin, father of the poor. He was known for his generosity, especially toward those in need. Which is interesting because he was living in Medina, right? And Medina had some incredibly wealthy companions.
Yeah, but he wasn't focused on wealth. It was all about sharing what he had, helping others, lifting them up.
And that's a powerful message, right? Generosity isn't just about money, it's about compassion, empathy. But sadly, this period of peace, it didn't last. The Battle of Muta was on the horizon.
Yeah, a big one. The Byzantines. They vastly outnumber the Muslims. Even the Prophet, he gave specific instructions for who should take command if the leaders fell in battle.
Wow. So they knew going in it was going to be rough.
They did. And this is where we see, the full extent of Jafar's bravery.
So they're going up against the whole Byzantine Empire. I mean, talk about a David and Goliath situation.
It was. And the first to fall, it was Zayd ibn Haritha, one of the Prophet's closest companions.
Man, what a loss that must have been for the army.
Devastating.
And then Jafar takes command, like the Prophet had said. This was more than just strategy, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was pure courage, stepping up when it mattered most.
And he wasn't just like, giving orders from the back.
He was right there in the thick of it, pushing forward, even after being wounded, over and over again.
The sources describe him like fighting with such ferocity. I mean, just imagine that.
It's hard to fathom that level of selflessness, really.
They say he fought until both of his arms were cut off.
Yeah.
And he finally fell with like 70 wounds on his body.
More than 70, they say.
Unbelievable. Just shows his incredible spirit, his unwavering commitment.
It's a story that has really stuck with people.
And even back in Medina, the Prophet, he could sense it, right? He knew.
He did. He told his companions that he had a vision of Jafar, his soul ascending to paradise.
Wasn't there something about wings?
Yes. He described him flying in paradise with the angels, which is how he got the nickname Dul Janahain, meaning the two-winged.
Oh, right. I remember that. What a beautiful image, though, connecting his sacrifice on earth to, well, eternal reward.
Powerful.
And Asma, what about her, waiting for her husband, only to hear that he's.
It's heartbreaking. Years in exile, raising their kids so far from home, and now this. But she was strong. She found a way to carry on.
It just shows you, these early Muslims, the strength they had, the faith, they faced so much hardship.
So much loss.
And the Prophet, even in his own grief, he went straight to Asma.
He did, to comfort her, her children.
He embraced them, wept with them, shared his vision of Jafar in paradise.
Such a moving moment. Sorrow, but also hope.
It says a lot about the Prophet, even in his own pain, he was there for others. And Asma's story, it doesn't end there.
No, not at all. Her life, it takes another turn. She marries Abu Bakr.
Abu Bakr, the first caliph.
The first caliph. They had a son together, Muhammad.
So she was married to, like, one of the most important figures in Islamic history. Amazing.
It is. And then, after Abu Bakr dies,
she married Ali.
She married Ali, Jafar's brother, the fourth caliph.
Wow. To be connected to 3 of the 4 rightly guided caliphs, that's pretty incredible.
It is. And it's a testament to her character, the respect she held within the community.
For sure. And there's this funny story about her sons, Muhammad ibn Jafar and Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr. They got into this, like, playful argument about which father was better.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
It just brings them to life, doesn't it? These little glimpses into their personal lives.
Totally. So human. And Asma, she just shuts them down with this brilliant response, praising both Jafar and Abu Bakr for their unique qualities.
Nice. Diplomatic and wise.
Exactly.
I bet Ali was impressed.
Well, he actually teased her, saying she left him with nothing to say.
Ah.
And Asma, quick as a whip, she reminded him that he was in the company of these great men.
I love it. It's a funny story, but it also shows how these figures, despite their differences, they were unified by their dedication to Islam, part of something bigger.
They were.
And it kind of brings us back to those unsung heroes, doesn't it?
It does.
Asma herself, think about what she went through, raising her children, facing all these challenges, and she left a mark on history, even if it wasn't always in the spotlight.
Exactly. It makes you think, how many other people like that were there, playing these crucial roles, even if their names aren't as well known?
So as we start to wrap up, thinking about Jafar's life, it's clear he had a huge impact, right? Leader, diplomat, compassionate person. It makes you wonder, how can we do a better job of recognizing those who work so hard without seeking, the fame?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's easy to focus on those in power, but
Yeah.
often it's the quiet dedication of people like Jafar that makes the biggest difference.
And even though we don't have tons of hadith narrated by Jafar directly, we still get this clear picture of him from others who knew him, right? Like Salama and Abu Huraira.
They kept his story alive.
And his son, Abdullah ibn Jafar, he became a pretty prominent figure too.
He did. Known for his generosity and piety, carrying on his father's legacy.
It's like this thread connecting generations, inspiring people to live by these values. So as we finish up our deep dive into Jafar ibn Abi Talib, I want to ask you, our listener, a question. Knowing what you know now, how does this change your understanding of early Islamic history?
And what about other figures, maybe not as famous, but who you think deserve to be remembered and honored, whose stories are out there waiting to be discovered?
Those are great questions to think about. Jafar's journey, it reminds us that history is made up of all these individual stories, and sometimes it's those less familiar ones that have the most to teach us. It's been great exploring this with you today. Until next time. It really makes you think about like the power of community too, how they faced all these challenges, not just as individuals, but as a group, helping each other.
Definitely.
And for me, Jafar's life, it's a reminder that impact, it can take so many forms. He was a leader, a diplomat, but also like this incredibly compassionate person. He touched so many lives.
You did.
Makes you wonder, how can we better honor those people, the ones who work so hard without wanting, like the recognition?
That's a really good question. It's easy to, I don't know, get caught up in those big stories.
Yeah.
Armies, leaders, all that.
Right.
But often it's the quiet dedication of people like Jafar that actually creates lasting change.
Totally. And even though, like, we don't have, volumes and volumes of hadith narrated directly by Jafar, we still get this really strong sense of who he was through other people, right? Salama, Abu Huraira,
He kept his memory alive.
and his son, Abdullah ibn Jafar. He became a pretty important figure himself.
That's right. Known for his generosity, his piety. Like father, like son.
Exactly. It's amazing passing down values, inspiring others. It's like this, I don't know, this thread that connects everything. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jafar ibn Abi Talib's life, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought. Knowing all this now, how does it change how you think about early Islamic history?
And building on that, are there other figures, maybe not as well known, but who you think deserve to be remembered? What stories are still out there waiting to be told?
It's a good thing to think about because Jafar's story, it shows us that history, it's really made up of all these individual lives, and sometimes it's those less familiar stories that have the most to teach us. Anyway, it's been a pleasure exploring this with you today. Until next time, everyone.